So Jack, for the next part of the session, I'd like you to take yourself back to that Holland code, which we spoke about earlier in the session today, which I got you to do.
Yep.
It was that 3-4 letter code that we came up with.
Yep.
Yeah. So for the next part of the session, I'd like you to keep that code and those words kind of in the front of your mind.
Sure.
I'm going to ask you a series of questions, if that's okay, around those codes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the aim, for that is that we can probably, from exploring those codes, we can maybe plan to make some decisions or get some clarity around, your career choices.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So your code was SAEI, I think, was it?
Yeah, SAE. I think the E and the I was pretty much tied, but I probably resonate more with the E, so I think more SAE.
Yeah. So social, artistic, and enterprising.
Mm.
What do those 3 words mean to you?
Well, social, I guess, is just being around people, loving people, and always being sort of life of the party sort of guy, and not in like an arrogant, egotistical way, more just really enjoy being around other people, and that's more of a driving factor of how I get filled up, where I get my energy, I guess. Yep. A is very much obviously my artistic side, creative side, my performing. That's what has been a big part of my professional life for the last few years. But I think as well, outside of that, just because I want to move away from the performing arts doesn't mean I want to lose the artistic. So I think that's like more than just performing. I guess that's as well like just creative thinking and problem solving and thinking outside the box.
Mm-hmm.
And then the E is sort of my entrepreneurial side. I've never been like super crash hot at it, but it's something I do enjoy.
Okay.
And it's just that sort of, got to make a living somehow. Got to pay the bills. Want to have a family one day. So it's just sort of doing what I enjoy, but with that enterprising sort of bit, it's making sure I can do it in a way that is going to be fruitful for me and my family.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
Yeah, totally makes sense. Like I notice you speak with a lot of passion when you speak about those first 2, the social and the artistic, but you still have a lot of respect for the enterprising by the sounds of things.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's true.
On that, it goes SAE, and then the I's there as well. So we can talk about that if you want. But how do you feel about the order of them? Do you think that they're in an order which fits well for you?
Yeah, I think they are. Yeah, I think the social aspect of me is definitely the biggest part of me in terms of like both privately, professionally,
yeah.
In my relationships, like that's always the biggest aspect. And then the A is just a bit less than that.
Mm-hmm.
I still love being creative, but I just love people. Like I'm all about it. I just want to be around people. I just want to be doing things with people, whether it's something fun or whether it's helping them through a hard time. It doesn't necessarily need to be upbeat, just being around people. And then the artistic is probably not as much of that, but still important. And then that's more than the E, because the E is more of just a practical, logistical sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not really the same as the first 2, if that makes sense.
Would you say that the E is more of a personal thing, and the other 2 are a little bit more of like a holistic part of your life thing? Kind of links into that, the extroversion and the agreeableness that we found in that those other tests.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the extroverted side of me is what makes me is what made that S, the highest.
Yeah.
So I think that, being around people is what drives my extroversion. And also because it's the same way, the flip of that is, because I am a very extroverted, I just love being around people. As opposed to like you've pointed out, which is really correct, that the E is more just a personal thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sort of going out into the world and want to start a business with people or anything like that. It's not like a driving factor. It's more just a thing that I reflect on and like, well, how am I going to make money? How am I going to make this work?
Yeah.
How am I going to support my family, etc. So yeah.
Yeah, well, it sounds to me, Jack, that you've got quite a good understanding of each of those terms and how they fit into your life. It's probably a good time. I think you might notice I've got this scale up here on the board from 1 to 10. If you were to take those three letters, the S, the A, and the E, and place them in on the scale of importance, so 1 being least not important at all, and 10 being really important, give you this pen, and take your time, but place the S, the A, and the E from 1 to 10.
Sure. I think 10 being most important, I think S is pretty much there. I'll probably even just say 10 to be honest. It's definitely the most important thing. So I think this is S. And then artistic is still pretty high but a bit lower. So I'd probably say like an 8.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like 8. And then the E is like probably down here, maybe like around a 4.
Okay.
Even maybe 3, maybe 5, depending on the day or the month.
Yeah.
But you know, it sort of varies as opposed to these ones are always really quite high, especially social. It's just what I live for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for doing that. What I noticed is that you were pretty confident in where you placed the S and the A. Went straight in for those, and the E, I think in your own words, you even said it can change from day to day. It's flexible. So it's good to know that you're strong in those, and this isn't as strong. How do you feel personally? You've got those two identifiers really high, and this one quite a bit lower. Do you feel that this is indicative for you? Do you feel comfortable with this? How do when you sit back and look at it? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I feel like that really sums up who I am, and what I want as well. So I think it's very much a true representation of where I'm at, and it may change from time to time, like you mentioned. The E does. Sometimes I might be like, oh, I'm gonna go out and get this really cool job, and I'm like, look, I'm gonna invest in the stock market, and then other days I'm like, money, I don't care, I just want to hang out with my mates. So I think that's the one that does teeter around a lot. But yeah, I feel very good about having these quite high, and especially social really high. Because I'd say that's the most important thing for me. That sort of extroverted social side of aspect of my life.
Yeah, for sure. Kind of pointed to the next part that I want to talk about is your life more as a whole. So if we talk about social, how does that look in the greater part of your life, of your everyday?
Well, I think it encapsulates pretty much all aspects. So for the longest time, in my professional world, it's definitely been the driving force. Definitely being in the performing arts and theatre, it's a huge aspect. And being around people who you get along with. And it's also really important to me. Like, I really value it because when you're, on stage with people, or you're performing with other people, it's like they're your teammates, and like you feel you can be very vulnerable. So it's really important that you're around people you love, and it's a hard thing to do by yourself. But then as well, outside of work, I just love like hanging out with people, and even when I'm not working, I'm still at a social event, or volunteering, or going out for dinner. I just love doing coffee dates with people. Even if it's just one-on-one, just hearing about them and how they've been old friends from school. Like it's the professional, it's the volunteering, it's the private life, it's my relationships, it's sort of everything.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It explains why you've rated it so high. And when I look back at I don't know if you remember, we did the Schwartz survey, and stimulation was one that you scored above average. And from what you said, I can understand that stimulation in that social part of your life seems to be an important factor. Would you agree with that?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, and I think I get bored of my own company.
Okay.
So like being stimulated by others is hugely important.
Yeah.
And having other people to laugh with, or cry with, or just hang out with, or be around, or have an intellectual conversation, or just discuss life and problems and relationships, and just really all aspects of it is definitely goes hand in hand with that stimulation, which I guess is why I scored so high on it, because that's I don't like being bored, and sometimes being by myself I get bored. So I prefer being stimulated and doing it around other people, and I find that goes hand in hand.
For sure. artistic is obviously a huge part of your professional life at the moment with all the acting. How would you describe the artistic? Talk about your career, but also outside of your career in the rest of your life. Where does this sort of artistic factor present itself?
Well, I think, like you mentioned, obviously it's huge in my career in the performing arts, and it's very important, obviously, to be artistic. It is like since I've been doing it professionally, I haven't done as much of it privately.
Okay.
And I think I missed that a little bit. So I think if I do sort of step away from the performing arts, I want that to be more in my private life than just professional. Because when you're, on stage getting all your sort of artistic side out, you get home, you don't feel like, playing the piano or reading, a play or something. Whereas I used to love doing that because it would be so enjoyable. But when you've been doing it for 8 hours that day, or you get home late at night after a 2-show day or whatever, you just don't feel like it. So I think I want that to be more in my personal life and to be able to just do it just for me. Whereas at the moment I'm doing it, for other people. I still love it, but it's just, I don't know if I want that to be the thing that pays the bills anymore. I think I just want that to be something that I can love and that's who I am. But it's not relying on that to be, bringing the bread in. If that makes sense.
Makes total sense, especially when I look at that back to the Schwartz. You scored, I think, potentially the highest on the hedonism and that pleasure.
Yeah.
So it's evident that seeking pleasure through artistic, something which is a priority to you, something that's important in your life. Hey.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that having done it professionally for a while, that it has not been as evident in my private life. So it's sort of taken the pleasure away a little bit because it's more structured when you're doing it in a team environment or in a group. I think that's why that has been a bit hard for me lately, because it has that pleasure that I always seek is not strongly there.
Yeah.
Because it's just at the moment it's more to pay the bills.
Well, that's it shows good signs of self-reflection, and you've obviously looked at that and realised that it's important to you and how you can get that balance. So it's definitely a good step moving forward in this journey in the career. Thirdly, the enterprising. Probably not as evident maybe in your life, but how would you say that enterprising self presents itself in your life day to day?
I think that's the high achiever in me.
Okay.
And it's the want to do really well, want to be something really good, want to do something that impresses other people, not necessarily just to be arrogant, egotistical, but more from the perspective that I like to sort of share what I do, and so I think that it's more like I want what I do, even if it is the social and artistic things, to still be something that allows me to not just pay the bills, but be able to live comfortably and be able to just still enjoy going out with friends. And I wouldn't be able to do as much of the S if I didn't have even just that little bit of the E.
Definitely.
So I think that's been a big contributing factor.
Yeah, and it kind of reflects back to what we were talking about earlier. You're at a point in your life where you realise to have the family, to have all these other things that are on the checklist for you. But this is an essential part of who Jack's gonna be as an adult. Hey.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's why I'm thinking of just moving away from the performing arts, because even though it's sort of the lowest of the three, it's probably the thing that's had the biggest contributing factor into me wanting to make that career jump.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably one of the big reasons.
Definitely. Well, you seem to have a great grasp on each of them. Something that kind of can be a little bit more tricky is identifying how they interact with each other in your life. Do you see relationships between the three letters in your life? How?
Yeah, definitely. The S and the A definitely very closely related, because I love to be creative and artistic, and a lot of my friends are like that. A lot of people I work with obviously are like that. So that's obviously a big thing. Like I was talking about before, with it's can be vulnerable being on stage and being with other people, and so they definitely play a contributing factor together.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the S and the E are the most separate, but I think the E and the A are linked in the ways of like, well, I'm artistic, but I'm going to be artistic in a way that allows me to be employed and in a way that pays the bills.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, theoretically, if money was never an issue,
Mm-hmm.
I would just be as artistic as I wanted to be, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas I think, the E, the enterprising, has made me go, okay, well, I can still be artistic, but maybe I just need to tweak how I do that. And now I'm looking to tweak that even further.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I would say they relate, but the S and the A are the strongest, and then
Awesome.
probably a bit between the E and the A.
Yeah, that's great. You've done a great job talking about these letters. In what we've discussed, have you been able to identify personal qualities, attributes in yourself that are important through discussion of these questions, this sort of questioning?
Yeah, I think one thing that's come up which sort of surprised me is talking about still like being an achiever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I think I never really saw that as valuable,
Okay.
but actually doing things that are going to move my life forward and help other people around me as well. And something that makes me, be proud of myself and be proud of me. So yeah, I think that's been a little bit surprising. Just in this discussion, that's sort of come up within myself. I think that's been a big thing that is probably also is what is wanting to make me move away from the performing arts.
Okay.
Because it's a hard lifestyle. It's hard to make a lot of money. Not that I just want to be rich, but I want to have enough to support a family.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's been at least a big contributing factor